Have you ever caught your reflection in a window and, for a split second, seen your father's face staring back? Or maybe you're in the middle of an argument and a phrase falls out of your mouth that sounds exactly like your mother. It's a disorienting, almost haunting feeling. It makes you stop and wonder, how much of me is actually me? We like to think of ourselves as the masters of our own identity, the architects of our own souls. But what if the blueprint was drawn up long before you ever took your first breath? What if the way you handle stress, the way you love, and even the way you process a joke was already decided? Today, we're peeling back the layers of the most famous debate in human history, nature versus nurture. Because the truth isn't just a 50-50 split. It's a terrifying, beautiful dance that you didn't choose to join. But understanding the steps might be the only way to finally take the lead. To understand who we are, we have to look at the numbers, specifically a concept called heritability. In psychology, we use the heritability coefficient, often written as h squared, to measure how much of the variation in a trait is due to genetics. Think of your personality like a radio. Nature provides the hardware, the speakers, the wiring, and the maximum volume. Nurture is the hand that turns the dial and chooses the station. Research in behavioral genetics suggests that for most personality traits, the genetic influence is roughly 40 to 50%. That means nearly half of your default settings, like how extroverted you are or how much you worry, is hard-coded. This isn't just a guess. It's backed by decades of studying the big five personality traits. We see that traits like neuroticism, your emotional stability, and openness have a massive genetic component. If you are born with a sensitive nervous system, you aren't weak, you simply have high-fidelity hardware. You are literally wired to pick up on signals that other people might miss entirely. But here's the catch. Genetics don't dictate your behavior, they dictate your potential. A seed has the genetic code to become a massive oak tree, but if it's planted in a desert, that code never gets to run. In 1979, two men met for the first time since they were infants. Both were named Jim. They were identical twins, separated at birth and raised by completely different families in different towns. When researchers finally brought them together, the world of psychology was shaken to its core. They didn't just share the same DNA, they shared a life that felt like a glitch in the matrix. Both Jims drove the same model of light blue Chevrolet. Both chain-smoked the same brand of cigarettes. Both had a habit of biting their fingernails to the quick. They even both had a dog named Toy. It's an eerie story that makes you wonder if our choices are actually choices at all. When we hear about the Jim twins, we feel a sense of loss. A fear that our uniqueness is just a biological script. If two people who have never met can live identical lives, then what is left for us to decide? It forces us to ask, are we just passengers in a vehicle driven by our ancestors? Or is there something else at play that the Jim twins didn't account for? The Jim twins are a fascinating outlier, but they don't tell the whole story. In psychology, we distinguish between two types of environments, shared and non-shared. Shared environments are the things you and your siblings have in common. The same parents, the same house, the same socioeconomic status. Surprisingly, research like the Minnesota study of twins reared apart shows that shared environments have a near zero impact on adult personality. This is why two siblings raised in the exact same household can be polar opposites. One is a high-achieving perfectionist, the other is a laid-back rebel. What actually matters are the non-shared environments. These are the unique experiences only you had. The specific teacher who believed in you, the first heartbreak that changed your perspective, or the specific role you played in your peer group. This is where the nurture side of the scale really carries its weight. Your DNA sets the boundaries, but your unique interactions with the world fill in the colors. It's the reason why even identical twins end up with different fingerprints and different souls. I remember a time when I tried to reinvent myself completely. I was tired of being the quiet one, the one who overanalyzed every text and every look. I decided I was going to be the life of the party, the bold, spontaneous version of me that I saw in movies. But after 3 nights of forcing it, I felt a bone-deep exhaustion that sleep couldn't fix. I wasn't just tired, I was grieving. I was fighting against a nervous system that was tuned for depth, not breadth. Maybe you felt that same friction, the ick that comes when you try to wear a personality that doesn't fit your frame. It's the moment you realize that your nature isn't a cage, it's a set of physical laws. You can't just decide to stop being affected by gravity, and you can't just decide to stop being the person your DNA spent thousands of years perfecting. But that realization doesn't have to be a death sentence for your growth. It's actually the first step toward real power. For a long time, we thought DNA was a permanent, unchangeable script, like a book that was already printed. But modern psychology and biology have discovered a field called epigenetics. Epigenetics is the study of how your behaviors and environment can cause changes that affect the way your genes work. Think of your DNA as a giant control panel with thousands of light switches. You are born with the switches, but your life experiences are what flip them on or off. A study on laboratory rats showed that pups who were licked and groomed more by their mothers grew up to be less stressed. The nurture they received literally chemically tagged their stress genes, turning down the volume on their anxiety. This is the bridge between nature and nurture. Your environment doesn't change your DNA sequence, but it changes your gene expression. This means that even if you have a genetic predisposition for something like depression or aggression, it isn't a guarantee. The switch for that trait might stay off forever if your environment doesn't trigger it. You aren't just a product of your genes. You are a living conversation between your biology and your biography. Think back to the street you grew up on. The way the neighbors talk to each other, the level of noise, the unspoken rules of your school hallway. We often mistake our personality for what is actually just a cultural adaptation. If you grew up in a place where being loud was the only way to be heard, you might think you're naturally extroverted. But put that same person in a quiet, contemplative environment for a year, and a different version of them starts to emerge. I've seen people move across the country, and within months, their unshakable traits begin to soften or sharpen. It's like we're mirrors reflecting the light or the shadows of the people we spend the most time with. We call this the social proximity effect. We aren't just born, we are continuously being built by the expectations of the rooms we walk into. If you feel stuck in a version of yourself you don't like, it might not be your DNA holding you back, it might just be the scenery. If personality is a dance between nature and nurture, then the Diathesis-Stress Model is the floor they dance on. Psychologists use this framework to explain why two people can experience the exact same trauma, yet one develops PTSD while the other remains resilient. Diathesis is just a fancy word for your biological vulnerability, the genetic hand you were dealt. Stress is the environmental pressure, the life events that happen to you. Think of it like a glass of water. Your genetics determine the size of your glass. Some people are born with a tall, narrow glass. Others have a wide, deep one. Life experiences, stress, loss, heartbreak, are the water being poured in. If your glass is small, high genetic vulnerability, it doesn't take much water to make it overflow. But even a massive, sturdy glass will eventually spill over if the storm lasts long enough. This model removes the shame from our personality struggles. It reminds us that breaking isn't a character flaw, it's a biological threshold. It also suggests that by lowering the water level, through therapy, mindfulness, or changing our environment, we can stay dry, even with a smaller glass. There is a certain grief in realizing you will never be the person you imagined. I spent years trying to fix my sensitivity, thinking it was a glitch in my system. I wanted to be thicker skinned, louder, less affected by the world around me. But the more I fought my nature, the more I felt like an actor playing a role in a play I didn't write. True peace doesn't come from changing your DNA. It comes from finally stopping the war against it. When you stop trying to turn a willow tree into an oak, you finally start to see the beauty in the way the willow bends. Maybe you've been told you're too much or not enough your entire life. But what if those traits aren't flaws? What if they are just the boundaries of your blueprint? Acceptance isn't giving up. It's finally getting the right set of tools for the house you're actually building. You stop trying to use a hammer on a glass window and start appreciating the light it lets in. The final piece of the puzzle isn't nature or nurture, it's neuroplasticity. For a long time, we believed the brain was set in stone by age 25. We now know that's simply not true. Your brain is more like a garden than a sculpture. Through a process called long-term potentiation, every time you repeat a thought or a behavior, you are physically strengthening the neural pathways in your brain. You are effectively rewiring the hardware your parents gave you. This is what psychologists call the third factor, personal agency. If nature is the map and nurture is the weather, then you are the driver. You cannot change the roads that were built before you got here, and you cannot stop the rain. But you can choose how you steer, how fast you go, and where you ultimately decide to park. Your personality is a dynamic system, not a static destination. By understanding your genetic floor, your baseline, you can finally stop wasting energy on the impossible and start focusing on the incredible. You aren't a victim of your biology, and you aren't a blank slate for the world to write on. You are a collaborator in your own creation.